Hello, my friends. Welcome to this series about science, but a very special kind of science, the spiritual science. As I mentioned before, I'm using this sequence of videos to share with you the results of about 50 years of research and practice on this area. And I'm presenting the material in a way that will make it simple for you to understand. But because it is huge, I have to present in the small parts like baby steps. The topic we'll discuss today is a kind of continuation of the episode 5. On the last episode, I present you the numbers. Not as we understand the numbers today, as just quantifiers, but the way the numbers was studied in the ancient times, like qualities, like representation of spiritual forces. And as I mentioned on the last episode, it's very difficult for the human mind to understand the vibrational qualities of the numbers, the virtues of the numbers. That's the reason we have to use the symbols as representatives of those forces. Today, I will share with you a very special kind of symbol used to represent the qualities of the numbers. I'm talking about the basic elements of astrology. So, this relation between numbers and planets is a powerful relation. And it came from ancient times. But today we use to relate some planets with specific numbers. But this information is very superficial. It's not the one we use when you're studying spiritual science. Today, because we consider the sequence of days of the week from Sunday to Saturday, we simply decide that because Sunday is day 1, is related to number 1. Monday is day 2, number 2. Tuesday 3, Wednesday 4, and so on. But the days of the week are related to the planets. In most of Latin language countries and other countries, they are related, if not with the planets, but with the gods of ancient mythologies. So Sunday is the day dedicated to the sun. Monday, moon. Tuesday, Mars. Wednesday, Mercury. So this is the simplified relation between numbers. Sun is 1, moon is 2, Mars is 3, Mercury is 4. But this approach cannot preserve the quality of the number when we relate to the quality we can find on each one of the astrological planets. So we need to go deeper to unveil this profound relation between numbers and planets. But before to go on, I would like to ask you to click like on this video. And if you want to see more of our videos, you can just subscribe my YouTube channel. Just look for my name, Carlos Gutterres, and you'll find this channel. Okay, so let's go ahead. The numbers and the planets. This is our topic for today. Each planet is related to two distinct numbers. So this is something interesting. Not just one number, but two numbers. One of these numbers has the spiritual or superior qualities of the planet. And the other one has the material or concrete qualities of that same planet. So the second number is more how the energy of that planet is manifested here in this world. The planets are like clothes that cover the qualities of the numbers. This is something we saw in the previous episode. All metaphoric examples we use are just clothes hiding the essence of each number. So, as I as I said, we have spiritual numbers and material numbers. So the spiritual numbers are presented here. One is the spiritual number of the sun, 2 is the moon, 3 is Jupiter, 4 is Uranus, 5 is Mercury, 6 Venus, 7 Neptune, 8 Saturn, and 9 Mars. Probably some of you are thinking, but we have more planets in astrological chart. Yes, in the modern astrology, we can have 1, 2, or maybe more elements. At least people includes Pluto, sometimes Chiron, maybe the asteroids. But I'm not saying that this way of practice astrology is wrong. I'm just telling you that we have different ways with different purpose. The elements of astrology I'm using here is related to something I call the spiritual astrology. And for the spiritual astrology, we use only those 9 planets. Of course, for regular astrology, that is telling us the influence of the planets on our material life, or the influence focus on this incarnation, Pluto, Chiron can be very important. But in the spiritual perspective, we may say that Pluto doesn't exist. And it's simple to understand. Pluto, according to the Greek and Roman mythology, is the god of the underworld, is the god of the realm of the dead. And when you study spirituality, you realize that that is just an illusion. So when you're focusing something related to eternity, this is the focus of spirituality, the energy of Pluto simply doesn't exist. That's the reason when you study spiritual science, we use this relation you can see on the screen. Only 9 numbers that are representatives of the forces and qualities of the 9 numbers. 9 planets, 9 numbers. This relation that I call the relation between the numbers and the spiritual qualities of the planets, this information came from India, ancient India. So we may say that this is a Vedic tradition. And you can use their numerology and astrology together, and is the source of the number that represents the spiritual quality of each one of the planets, each one of the 9 planets. So the first one is Surya. Surya is a god, Indian god, related to the sun. So number 1 is the number they relate to Surya. in Surya, in astrology, is the sun. If we are looking for one word that defines the major quality of Surya or defines the major quality of the sun, this word may be vitality. One is vitality. Number two is related to the goddess Chandra. Chandra is the goddess of the moon. So two is the moon. And the major quality of the moon is intuition. Three is the number related to the god Brihaspati. Is the Indian version of Jupiter. Three is Jupiter. And the major quality of Jupiter is happiness. For some of you, this happiness seems something unexpected because usually in the astrologic books, Jupiter is related to justice. I believe this is a huge mistake. But there's an explanation why the ancient astrologers decide to relate Jupiter to justice. On their spiritual journey, on their meditations, sometimes they find a way to reach very high levels in meditation, to reach the spiritual realm. And on this dimension, everything is peaceful, everything is in harmony, there is no struggle, there's no fight, there's no pain, only balance. And when those sages return back from their meditations, they believe they could bring these peaceful qualities to our manifestation here. But they realize it's not easy because human beings don't have this kind of discipline. So that's the reason human beings create rules, laws, to establish a pattern of behavior to avoid struggle. But it's impossible for the limited mind of human being to reproduce the perfect balance we have in the spiritual realm. So that's the reason they relate Jupiter to as one of the rulers of the spiritual realm, and they believe that justice is a way that can bring those qualities like harmony, peace, balance here. But this, as I told you, is a misunderstanding because in the spiritual dimension, they don't know what is justice because they don't have injustice. So Jupiter represents this peace, balance, harmony we have in the spiritual dimension. And we can define all those qualities in just one simple perception, happiness. That's the reason Jupiter represents happiness. And 3 is the number of spiritual qualities of Jupiter. Number 4 is the spiritual number of Uranus. But in the ancient times, when this relation between numbers and planets was defined, Uranus was not new because we cannot see Uranus with naked eye. But the ancient sage, they knew there is an energy in the space expressing a very specific kind of quality. So intuitively, they knew there was this energy, and they call Rahu. Rahu is Uranus, just found more than 100 years ago. So 4 is the number of Uranus. And the major quality of Uranus is wisdom. Number 5 is the number of Mercury. In Vedic, the word for this planet is body. And as you know, the major quality of Mercury is a clear, open, and enlightened mind. That's the reason when Siddhartha Gautama reached the enlightenment, he was called Buddha, because Buddha is a word that came from body, the name of Mercury. So 5 is Mercury. And the major quality of Mercury is perfect balance. Number 6 is the number of the goddess Shukra, and is in our tradition Venus. So 6 is the spiritual number of Venus. And the major quality of Venus, the spiritual quality of Venus, is charity. Number 7 is the spiritual number of Neptune. And like Uranus, Neptune could not be seen using a naked eye. So in the ancient times, the sages, they knew there was a specific force in the sky. Bring this energy, send this energy to us. But because they could not see, they have to use intuition to find and to include Neptune on their charts. And they use the name Ketu for Neptune. And you can see the illustration like Uranus, Neptune is represented by a god, a dark god or dark goddess. Because, in the middle of the night, you cannot see that planet in the darkness of the night sky. So number 7 is the number of Neptune. 7 means spirituality. And this is the major quality of Neptune. Number 8 is Shani. Shani is Saturn. The major quality of Saturn is knowledge. So knowledge is a blessing offered by Saturn. In the modern astrology, they used to say that Saturn is always teaching boundaries, limitation. Only when you don't have enough understanding, enough knowledge. So we need boundaries. But if you have a deep understanding about everything, you don't need boundaries because you automatically identify and respect boundaries. Number 9 is the number of the god, Indian god called Mangala. Mangala is Mars for us. So 9 is Mars, and the quality of Mars is action. But you have another sequence, a sequence of the material numbers. So the material numbers is telling us how the energy of the planets can be expressed here in the material world. So in this case, we have number 1 as the material expression of Neptune, 2 as Uranus, 3 Saturn, 4 Jupiter, 5 Mars, 6 Sun, 7 Venus, 8 Mercury, and 9 is the material number of the Moon. So the material numbers was discovered and related by the Greek mathematicians. So in the classic Greece, mathematicians learned to relate numbers and the material qualities of the planets. And they found this not only using mathematics, but they used the geometry, the sacred geometry. In geometry, the square represents manifestation. So when the Greek mathematicians discovered the magical squares, they automatically relate those to the planets because a square is a way to manifest. So when we have something magical like a magical square, they are manifesting a very specific quality of energy. And they realize that those qualities are directly related to the quality of the planets. So let's see the magic squares. The first one is the magic square of Saturn. So here we have the square of 3, or when you multiply 3 by itself, we have 9 numbers. So the way the sequence of numbers from 1 to 9 is distributed here on this square is what makes the square something magic. Because if you add all the columns, or if you add each column, each line, or each diagonal, you have always the same result, in this case, 15. So when you distribute the sequence of numbers from 1 to 9 in this specific way, this is unique, you can bring something very special, a physical manifestation of the qualities of Saturn. The next one is the Jupiter magic square. So because the material number of Jupiter is 4, the magical square of Jupiter is 4 multiplied by 4. So we have the sequence of numbers from 1 to 16 distributed in a unique way that doesn't matter which column or which line you decide to add, the result will be always the same, and the same for the diagonals. The 5 is the material number of Mars. So the square of 5 creates the magic square of this planet. The next one is the magic square of the Sun. When we multiply 6 by 6, we have the square with 36 numbers. So for my friends who are students of Jinshin Jutsu, you can find a very special relation on this specific magic square. Because in Jinshin Jutsu, number 36 is a very special number. So now you have one more explanation. Why 36? 36 is how to anchor here in the manifested world the qualities of the sun. So I'm talking about light, and we're talking about vitality. So this is how we manifest light and vitality, is through using the sequence from 1 to 36, distribute on this very specific way. 7 is the magic square of Venus. So when you multiply 7 by 7, we have this sequence of numbers distributed in a unique way that creates this specific magic square. And the magic square of Mercury is created when you multiply 8 by 8. And finally, the magic square of the moon is when you multiply 9 by 9, because 9 is the material number of the moon. So when you study magic square, you realize that you have just 7 magic squares. But I mentioned 9 planets. So what happens with Uranus and Neptune? I told you the material number of Uranus is 2, and the material number of Neptune is 1. But you know, 1 and 2 cannot generate a magic square. So we need to understand why we have those 2 numbers or material numbers of those specific planets. The qualities of Uranus and Neptune are very subtle. So they are, we may say they are almost ineffable. So they cannot be totally grounded here on earth. Spirituality and wisdom cannot be 100% grounded here on earth. That's the reason they have a spiritual, a material number, but this number cannot generate a magic square, because the magic square manifests totally a specific energy. So this is the relation. Neptune is one is spirituality, and the material number of Uranus two is wisdom. And those are the unique two planets that have no magical square. Okay, so let's take a look to understand deeper why Uranus and Neptune are different. Number one is the material number of Neptune. But Neptune is the ruler of the divine dimension, the most subtle dimension. You know, on the first episode of our series, I present you the 9 different dimensions, the 7 different dimensions of the nature. Something we call the great mysteries of nature, 7 dimensions. So Neptune is the ruler of the 7th dimension, the 7th plan. And then the dimension we call the dimension of will and power of the creator is the dimension of the ideas, creative ideas. We may say that Neptune is a reflection of nihil. Nihil is a word for nothingness. But you know, that kind of nothingness that contains the totality, that contains everything. About Uranus, we have number 2 as the material number. And Uranus rules the dimension of wisdom. This is the 6th plan, just below the dimension of Neptune, the dimension of wisdom and universal love. Uranus represents the source and beginning of everything. Because, you know, the energy that moved the creation was love. But we'll talk more about this in another episode. So one more thing. When you study the numbers, when you study the planets, we begin to understand something that we may call the science of the proportions. We are in the middle of this huge universe. We have the macrocosmos above and surrounding us in the space where we have stars, galaxies, and universes. You know, according to the new theory about the multiverse, this universe is not the only universe that exists. And we have the microcosmos. Consider everything this is very, very small. So we are like the bridge between the macro and the microcosmos. And we have our being bridging and understanding both possibilities. So we can see that we have elements on this universe that they are huge. And we have elements on this universe, they are important too, but it's very, very little. So what we discover studying spiritual science is that the energy of the numbers, the energy of the sequence of from 1 to 9, as I mentioned in the previous episode, they are the firstborns of the creator. And the energy, the power of the numbers are very important to create this universe. So we can find those energies everywhere, in the macrocosmos and in the microcosmos. So the same energy, we may say this is the energy of Mercury, we can find is this liquid metal we call Mercury. We can find on this rock that circulates the sun, very close to our sun. But the same energy is present in many different levels of this hierarchy. In the atom of Mercury, or in our entire galaxy, because the Milky Way vibrates as a unity, as a body, with the qualities of number 5, or with the qualities of Mercury. Let me give you another example. Example of the science of the proportions. Number 1. So let's begin at the beginning. And I promise I'll talk much more about these in future episodes, but just to give you an example. The energy of number 1 can be found in many different layers of manifestation, or in many different representatives on the manifested world. For example, number 1 presents a very specific quality that we can find in the atom of gold. So the atom of gold is the representative of number 1 in the dimension of the atoms. Among the insects, the quality of number 1 we'll find in the energy of the bees. Between the flowers, the sunflower. So we can find, the same energy present in many different layers of this hierarchy. Between the animals, we have the lion as a representative of the energy of the number 1, or as the representative of the sun, because if you take a look in the books written in the ancient times or in the Middle Age, you will not see numbers, but you'll see the planets. So you see gold is the metal of the sun. The bee is the insect related to the sun. Lion is the animal that brings the energy of the sun. So between the stars, we have the sun. Between the galaxies, Andromeda galaxy, our neighbor galaxy, vibrates the energy of the sun. And for sure, there will be an entire universe that vibrates the energy of the sun. So this is something I call the science of the proportions. We'll see much more in our journey. So no, this episode is very important. I know this is a long episode, but this is the information I'm sharing. You will be the foundation that will allow us to go ahead in our journey to understand this spiritual realm or the spiritual journey with more clarity. So thank you so much for following me until the end of this episode. Maybe for most of you need to watch this episode more than one time, because I know there's a lot of information. And the important thing is to know that this information here will be very useful for our continued journey. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.